The Akatsuki, one of the most terrifying and powerful groups of villains in the entirety of anime. Now, we've spent a good amount of time talking about the Akatsuki on this page. We've done you-know-nothings about members of the Akatsuki. I've even ranked and explained each and every single one of them. I will be redoing that video at one point. It's just I did it so early. It was so poor quality. But you know what we've never done for the Akatsuki? Provided a way, a definitive way, that is, to kill every single one of them. And I know what you're thinking,
Well, Nick, technically they all died. We know how to kill them.
and you're right, they have all died, but I'm not talking about them being killed by incredibly strong shinobi. I'm talking about if you or me was just thrown into the Naruto world and maybe ground our way up to mid-jonin level, how would you get through a fight with an Akatsuki member? This right here is the first in what might be a series called Surviving Naruto. But before we survive in a fictional universe, I won't survive unless you guys like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Yeah, I'm basically like Tinkerbell. And if you guys want to keep me alive till 150, please go ahead and follow my other YouTube page, NC Gamer 23, where instead of talking about how to kill the Akatsuki, I play video games like Subnautica. But before we get into all that, guys, today we have a new sponsor, Opera GX. Opera GX is a browser dedicated to the gamers out there. If you find that the browser you're using right now uses way too much of your PC's RAM, well, this is the solution. But listen, we all have our passwords saved in our own browsers that we use, right? So you're gonna need some convincing. So here I go. There's three major reasons to switch to Opera GX. One, for their browser resources that minimize lag and FPS drop. One of these browser resources is called GX Control. GX Control is all about when you want a game with a browser open with a couple of tabs. See, I'll listen to music while I game, or I'll have a tutorial up, but I don't want the tabs in this browser to minimize my gaming experience. If I'm using Opera GX, I can dedicate how much RAM my PC is driving towards those tabs and keep my computer focused on the most important thing, my gaming. The second browser resource is a network limiter. Making sure your RAM and processing power is going in the right direction is great and all, but what about Wi-Fi? Opera allows you to limit how much of your bandwidth is going towards the browser, making sure that your connectivity stays perfect in game. The second reason to go to Opera GX is to keep your friends close and your games closer. Opera GX is the only browser with integrated Twitch and Discord directly into your sidebar. This allows you to get notifications from all of the social media you use directly in your browser without having to have every single one of these tabs open. There's also a little thing called the GX Corner, which is a little bit like a newspaper for gamers. The GX Corner keeps you up to date on free-to-play games, new releases, and breaking news in the video game world. You can even switch between platforms and see which platforms are getting new games and when. And lastly, nobody likes light mode on their computer. It's 2 a.m., you've been gaming for hours, and you open up a browser, flashbang. With Opera GX, you can force dark mode on every single tab. Never have to worry about singeing off your eyebrows again. So what are you guys waiting for? Click the link in my pinned comment or my description to get the best browser for gamers. And before we know it, guys, nobody will ever be able to blame bad play on lag ever again. So the Akatsuki, they're killed by people like Naruto or Might Guy or Sakura, some of the strongest ninjas in the entirety of the Naruto-verse, while the Akatsuki tend to treat regular shinobi like fodder. But what if you were slapped into the world of Naruto? The chances of you becoming, well, Naruto are very slim. Chances are people like you and me are highballing for the dude who spits the toothpick out of his mouth or the head of interrogations. I'm literally the Naruto encyclopedia and I cannot remember either of their names. So with a mid to high level jonin set of abilities, how would you, your average person, beat an Akatsuki member? Well, for some it would be easier and others it would be very difficult. But there is a roadmap that I have drawn for every single member. So why don't we start with the easy and work our way up to the hard? And the easiest member of the Akatsuki to defeat would be Black Zetsu. See, there's a couple of camps in the Black Zetsu's power level. There's he defeated Madara and therefore he is the strongest member of the Akatsuki, and the he's only as strong as the person he binds himself to camp. See, I reside in the latter. Black Zetsu himself is said to have all 5 elemental releases and yin and yang, and he's able to use the abilities of anybody he ties himself to. Ties himself to Obito, he can use Obito's Sharingan. Ties himself to a white Zetsu, who can use wood release. But I'm not talking about merged Black Zetsu. No, I'm just talking about the physical amalgamation of Kaguya's will, the Black Zetsu puddle. For the average Jonin like you and me, this would not be a tough battle. The only problem with this battle would be making sure he doesn't bind to you, because he was able to bend Madara to his will, so we don't really stand a chance. So what we're gonna do is, if we come into battle with Black Zetsu, all we really need to accomplish is trapping him with Earth Release. Black Zetsu is, remember, basically just a stretchy ball of shadows. He can stretch incredibly far and can be cut in half, but he does have a physical body. But that physical body doesn't have like hands or claws or teeth or anything like that. He only gets those from binding onto other people. And this is actually sort of the way that Black Zetsu died in the first place. Well, I guess he's not technically dead, he's just kind of sealed. After Naruto and Sasuke both get their hands on Kaguya and she begins to be sealed within a new moon, Naruto just kind of chucks him into that new moon. And because he has no body and no way to get out of the moon, he's just stuck there. So we could just use Earth Release to trap him somewhere, and if we're really feeling spicy, just open a hole in the top and spit some Fire Release in there. No more Kaguya's will. Next up in terms of strength would be Karin. Yes, I'm including Hebi/Taka here. See, Karin, while she may seem like a easy out, isn't actually. Karin is probably one of the best sensor type ninjas in the entirety of Naruto. If she wants to find you, she absolutely will. She can pinpoint specific chakra natures from dozens of kilometers away. Not to mention, she's pretty much immune to Genjutsu because her mind's eye of the Kagura allows her to reflect her mind's eye onto herself to see if her chakra network has been disrupted. Not to mention the fact that she's a full-blooded Uzumaki, which means she has an insane amount of chakra and an inherent healing factor in massive life force. A life force and healing factor so insane that when people bite her, they get access to it and instantly heal. So how do you kill somebody who's gonna see you coming and is immune to Genjutsu and has so much chakra? Well, let's be real, you're not fighting them for longer than they can fight you. Well, luckily for us, Karin isn't much of a fighter. With any meager amount of ninjutsu knowledge, and if you can avoid adamantite chains should she pull that out, which if we're being real, she's not going to, because adamantite chains is meant to be used on very large targets like tailed beasts. So yeah, with a medium amount of ninjutsu and taijutsu knowledge and enough speed to speed blitz her, it doesn't really matter if she's gonna see you coming because she's not gonna win the fight anyways. She's a support character. So like, yes, obviously she has this incredible life force, but like that's not gonna stop her from dying from a kunai to the neck, you know? And if you kill Karin, you get the 2-in-1 bonus of also killing Sasuke, because who's gonna plot armor him back to life? After Karin, we have another member of Taka/Hebi, Swagetsu. Now, Swagetsu is where we start to have like actual fights here. Swagetsu is almost as talented in Kenjutsu as his older brother, Mangetsu. He collected the majority of the 7 swords of the mist and can use them, which makes him one of the best Kenjutsu, aka sword users, in the history of Naruto. On top of that, he has the Hozoki clan Kekkei Genkai, aka hydrification, which allows him to essentially make any part of his body just water, making him impervious to physical attack. And heaven forbid you fight him somewhere around water, he can just disappear into that water and reappear anywhere he needs to. Also, he can add water to certain parts of his body to increase his striking power, like he does with his arms. But he and all of the Hozuki clan have one relatively glaring problem. When you're made of water, you need 2 things: to stay away from lightning, and also a lot of water. We've seen that Swagetsu actually gets dehydrated rather quickly and therefore has to keep a large jug of water on him at all times. Apparently, I'm a Hazuki. So if you can lure Swagetsu to somewhere that's relatively more arid, like, oh, I don't know, the village hidden in the sand, you can essentially dry him out, so maybe his hydrification technique won't work as well. Or you can just hit him with a bunch of lightning. It's literally that easy. I mean, Boruto figured it out. I mean, how hard could it be? After Swagetsu, well, we have another member of Taka/Hebi, Jugo. See, Jugo is a really tough fight, mostly because he has a clan-specific Kekkei Genkai that allows him to constantly be pulling in nature energy. So you know how Naruto's got to cup his hands together and say Om to get all of the nature energy? Yeah, Jugo just does it passively, which means that Jugo, like Edo Tensei people, has limitless chakra. On top of that, he can make his arms and legs into cannons that makes him one of the most terrifying taijutsu users in the entirety of the show. And we learned in Boruto, if he takes in too much nature chakra, he turns into a giant nature monster essentially and rages out and is incredibly hard to fight. I mean, Konohamaru like kinda stood his ground against him, so like how hard to fight could he be? Like, I feel like Konohamaru is exactly what we would be. I feel like that's the power level I'm explaining when I say mid to high level Jonin. But the problem that Konohamaru ran into was that you don't try to out taijutsu somebody with limitless chakra and cannon arms. Now you just Put him in genjutsu. We've quite literally never seen Jugo use ninjutsu. He's got a damn near impenetrable body. He's got limitless chakra and taijutsu skills like crazy. Also, if he's all hulked up, he's not gonna be in the state of mind to snap himself out of genjutsu. But we don't even know if he wasn't hulked up, he would be able to snap himself out of genjutsu, because once again, never seen him use ninjutsu, so his understanding of chakra control may be very limited. So yeah, just put him in genjutsu and then stab him. But speaking of people who don't use ninjutsu, next up on our list is Hidan. You see, there's about a million ways to defeat Hidan, and Asuma didn't figure out any of them. So essentially, for those of you who haven't seen Shippuden in a while, Hidan is immortal. He's actually technically only invulnerable, but he can die if he stops giving blessings to Lord Jashin, aka sacrifices, or if he stops eating and drinking. We don't know if he ages. We've never really seen him for a long enough time to like see him age. So invulnerable is the better word. Hidan has this ability, and it's his only ability, that if he tastes your blood, he can transfer all the damage done to him onto you. Essentially, he draws a little circle after he gets your blood, and then he can stab himself in the heart and boom, your heart explodes. But to do that, he needs to be standing in the circle he drew, and also he needs your blood. And you're probably like,
Well, yeah, Nick, people bleed all the time in shinobi fights.
and I guess you're right, but that's only if they're fighting other people who are capable of doing ninjutsu, because Hidan is not capable of doing ninjutsu, which means unless he's hitting you with his scythe, he's not gonna make you bleed, which means if you are further than 6 feet away from Hidan, you're safe. So let's just rip through a couple of the ways that you could defeat Hidan. Puppets would be good. Get Hidan to fall into the Black Maiden, and ensure after you stab him with all those swords that go into the Black Maiden, he's not dead, but he's still stuck. Or, you know, if you're not a puppet master, shadow clones. And sure, he's really good at taijutsu, so are your shadow clones gonna defeat him? No, maybe not. Strap some explosive tags to them. Sure, also that explosion will not kill him, but if it pops his head off, you can pick it up and bury it like Shikamaru in a way less cool way. There's long-range jutsus like water bullet or wood dragon and other things like that. Or just like with the person we just talked about, genjutsu. I will never understand how Asuma dies and it's not like their number one thing to be like, hey, remember Asuma's baby mama Kurenai, the head of genjutsu in Konoha? Why don't we have her avenge Asuma? Like, why was Kakashi there? Bring Kurenai. Bafflingly stupid. Because just like with Jugo, if you don't understand ninjutsu, you do not have the chakra control to break yourself out of genjutsu, which means even minor, like low-level genjutsu would work very effectively. Like, we wouldn't have to worry about running him to an explosive hole if he was just standing still in an endless loop of Kurenai coming out of a tree. You could have just dug the hole around him. But there's no way you're digging a hole around the next entry on our list. Daedara. You see, Daedara is very scary and very popular. He was also the youngest member of the Akatsuki, joining at 19. You see, Daedara has basically got one ability. It's Explosion Release. Explosion Release is a Kekkei Genkai that was specific to the Explosion Corps, which is a group of people in the Hidden Stone who explode things. Do they do it for construction? Do they do it for combat? We don't really know. But eventually one day, Daedara got sick of either doing construction or exploding people and decided to steal a forbidden jutsu of the Hidden Stone. A jutsu that gave you mouths on your hands and your chest. And we wonder why the Hidden Stone is slowly but surely becoming the worst village in Naruto. I mean, Konoha's forbidden jutsus, Edo Tensai, Shadow Clones, Flying Raijin. But look out for the Hidden Stone, got other mouths to munch with. Regardless, with these hand mouths, essentially Daedara is able to put clay in there and infuse his chakra with the clay and then use his Explosion Release to explode said clay. And this clay can come in a myriad of different shapes. It can be spiders that run at you, crows that fly at you, a dragon he flies on, or just microscopic little explosives that you inhale and that kill you from the inside. This repertoire that Daedara has to tap into makes him incredibly versatile. But there's one weakness to this exploding clay. Well, this exploding clay is a combination of earth and lightning release. Think of it a bit like earth is the TNT and lightning is the fuse. So if somebody else runs lightning through this exploding clay, it nullifies it. A bit like cutting the fuse off said TNT. We see this happen when Sasuke inhales a bunch of the C4 micro explosives and runs electricity through his body and nullifies all of the explosives. And while the only way we've ever truly seen the explosive clay explode is Daedara doing a hand sign and yelling out, "Cuts!" we don't really know the true functionality of the clay. That is to say, we don't know if this is Daedara enacting lightning release on his clay to explode it, or if it's an entirely different thing. You see, Daedara uses the Seal of Confirmation. This seal throughout Naruto is usually shown to activate a ninjutsu. Think about Inojin and Sai. They use the Seal of Confirmation when they're activating their Ninja Beast art scrolls. Or Hashirama and Madara in the Valley of the End. They're both holding up the Seal of Confirmation. So once again, we don't really know if it's Daedara using a separate jutsu or just activating a lightning release. The reason that I'm pontificating on this point is because if it's not a separate jutsu that only Daedara knows to explode that clay, and it is just lightning release, his clay could be used against him. If you run lightning through his C2 dragon and you can explode it, well, there goes Daedara's legs. But let's assume for a second that you can't explode his clay against him. Even basic level lightning release is going to allow you to nullify all of his explosions. And while I know Sasuke has lightning release and he still couldn't really back Daedara into a corner, Sasuke had an inherent disadvantage against Daedara. You see, Daedara had to join the Akatsuki because he lost to Itachi. Daedara specifically trained one of his eyes to be impervious to ocular genjutsu. That only means he's trained against ocular genjutsu. In most, genjutsu is not ocular. I mean, yes, all genjutsu coming from Sharingan are ocular, but look at Jiraiya's combination genjutsu he does with Ma and Pa. It's auditory. If you hear the song, you enter the genjutsu. So we actually know that Daedara is weak to genjutsu, just not of the Sharingan kind. And like I said, we're gonna be average Jonin. We're not gonna have a Sharingan. So one, you're gonna have to use lightning release to get him out of the air. You're gonna have to strike whatever he's riding on and nullify it. And two, you're gonna have to use lightning release to stop all of the explosive clay he's throwing at you. And then in the midst of all of this, you are gonna have to pull off genjutsu on him. So, I mean, let's be real, our chances aren't great, but there's a strategy. Daedara is a really tough out. And you know what's funny? Even though the next person we're gonna talk about is stronger, in my opinion, I think she's an easier out than Daedara. The next person we're gonna talk about is Konan. You see, Konan beat Obito in a fight.
No, she didn't. Obito won in the end.
He cheated. Also, Izanagi and Izanami were the biggest mistake Kishimoto ever made. But there's a reason Konan beat Obito in a fight. One, hella prep time. Two, she's a genius. Three, she's kinda busted. Like Swagetsu or even Obito, Konan can make her body into paper. It actually already is paper, which makes her relatively impervious to physical attacks. So taijutsu is kind of out on Konan. If you punch her, she can just move the paper around your arm and she can either trap you or just avoid the attack. And if we're being entirely real, ninjutsu is also kind of out on Konan. Because what's the one type you would use against Konan? Probably fire release, right? But we've seen Konan tank a fireball from Jiraiya, which would mean that she doesn't have much of a weakness to fire type, and the rest she can probably just avoid. So if taijutsu's out and ninjutsu's out, I mean, you're probably thinking I'm gonna say genjutsu, right? And while that's not like the worst idea of all time, it's kind of boring. You see, Konan fights in a way where she uses the paper that is her body to attack you. She makes walls of paper, she makes tornadoes of paper, she makes weapons out of paper. Konan's biggest weakness is that she's attacking with her body. You see, Konan is not made of infinite paper. I mean, she can make paper pretty much at will. I mean, that's why she was able to literally split an ocean in half with explosive tags. But Konan's body itself is not infinite. And therefore, when she attacks you with a wall or a paper crane or something like that, that paper is gonna cycle back to her eventually. Starting to feel where I'm going here? There is nothing stopping you while fighting Konan from attaching explosive tags to the paper she's attacking you with. You can avoid her attacks for, I don't know, 3 to 4 minutes while you attach explosive seals to the paper she's using to attack you. As long as you do it discreetly enough, eventually she will bring all of her paper back to her body and be whole. And when she is whole and there is 10 to 20 explosive tags hidden inside of her, activate. You see, explosive tags need to be activated just like Daedara's clay, which means they can be detonated whenever. So if you discreetly enough sneak in 10 or so explosive tags, well, explosion beats paper last time I checked. Oh, I forgot somebody. Sorcery. I mean, he's kind of forgettable. He should have gone before Konan because he's weaker than Konan. But just like Konan, there's actually a pretty easy way to defeat Sorcery. Problem is, you kind of have to be a specific kind of person. But this isn't a stretch because there's a lot of these specific kind of people. To beat Sorcery, you have to be a Hyuga. I mean, there's other ways to beat Sorcery, but this is pretty much the best way. Also, I feel like it's not a stretch because there is a lot of Hyuga Jonin. Like, so much so that in the 4th grade Shinobi Worlds War, Hidden Stone Shinobi saw saw Hyuga clan members and were like, ah, Hyugas, the guys who gave us trouble in the Third Great Shinobi World War. Like, there's like literally hundreds of them. So the chances that you get to be a Hyuga are not low, but there's a reason you have to be a Hyuga in order to beat Sorcery. 64 palms or even 128 palms would be incredibly useful against 100 puppets. Do you remember when Neji was quite literally snagging spiders out of the air and there was thousands of them? Having something like that would be very useful against 100 enemies. Also, having something like rotation when enemies are going to be attacking you from all sides would also be incredibly useful. Not to mention, having a Byakugan would allow you to see all of the 100 enemies attacking you and identify where Sorcery is. You see, none of those puppets have a chakra signature. Sorcery does. So you would be able to instantly identify where Sorcery was on the battlefield and make your way to him. But here's the thing, there's 100 puppets between you and Sorcery. That's kind of a problem. That's why he has them. And even when you do get to Sorcery, well, he's got a puppet on that's very powerful, and under that puppet is another puppet. So how do I expect a regular Jonin, even though that regular Jonin is a Hyuga, to work his way through 100 puppets? I don't. In fact, you would only need to defeat one puppet. Remember in the Sasuke retrieval arc when Neji was fighting Spider Mouth Guy, and Spider Mouth Guy went to the second form of his curse mark, and he began shooting mouth arrows at Neji from very far distances away, and Neji got hit by 2 of them? But those spider mouth arrows were attached to a chakra thread, and Neji grabbed the chakra thread and used Gentle Fist on that chakra thread and killed the dude on the other end of it. Yeah, there's like quite literally nothing stopping you from doing that to a puppet master. You can shoot a Gentle Fist technique attack through that chakra thread on one puppet, and as long as it's still attached to Sorcery's fingers, it's gonna destroy his chakra network. And that's literally it. You just need to grab a hold of one of his chakra strings, which, by the way, you have a Byakugan, you're gonna see him. But speaking of people largely comprised of threads, the next person after Konan is Kakuzo. You're not gonna believe this, but you beat Kakuzo the same way you beat Sorcery. I know what you're saying.
Kakuzo has all 5 elemental releases. He's the best taijutsu user out of all of the Akatsuki. He's got 5 hearts. How are you going to use Gentle Fist against him?
Well, all of his hearts are attached to his chakra network. Also, he's well documented as being one of the slowest members of the Akatsuki. And while his hands do go crazy, so do most Hyuga members. Also, it wouldn't be a surprise to any Hyuga members that he had 5 hearts, because they would see it instantly. You use your Byakugan on a man, you would see 5 huge chakra signatures in that man. And all you have to do is 64 or 128 palms each of those masks. But this man went up against Hashirama. Yes, you're absolutely right. He did. He lost, but he went up against Hashirama. So to assume you would get close enough is a stretch. The thing is, you don't actually necessarily have to get close enough, because once again, if you can just grab his arm, you can fry his chakra network. Or when he stretches his arm out, you can dodge it and hit the Tenketsu spot in his stretchy arms. That is, if his stretchy arms have Tenketsu spots, because it's kind of a human thing. I'm gonna assume they do, because the hands need chakra to stretch. But there is one problem with this theory, and it's the fact that all 4 of his extra hearts have to be inside of him for you to fry all of them simultaneously. So this would kind of have to be a surprise thing. You would have to bait him into stretching his arm out and then start hitting some Tenketsu spots, or just grab his arm and trying to fry his whole chakra network. If you can do that, you're good. If you can't do that and, you know, the monsters start to leave him and they all have their own elemental releases, then let's be real, there's nothing we can do. So you just gotta pretend to be weak and scared, which, if we're being real, I wouldn't have to pretend. Moving on. Up next after Kakuzo, we have Orochimaru. Now, you can't kill Orochimaru. He always comes back to life. Unless you killed Orochimaru, hunted out Anko, pulled him out of Anko, killed him there, hunted down Sasuke, pulled him out of there, killed him there. You're not really pulling anything off. But for the sake of fun, let's talk about how you kill Orochimaru like once. He's like a cockroach. You can't get rid of him. Orochimaru is arguably one of the best users of ninjutsu in the entire show. He's basically the reason Edo Tensei came back. He has the 3 gates, which stopped a tailed beast bomb. He survived Reaper Death Seal, and he's basically figured out immortality so he can try and figure out every single ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu technique on Earth. So what do you use against somebody who's basically unkillable and a master of ninjutsu? And oh, if you get too close, he can just extend his limbs to bite you and then give you a curse mark. That has a 90% chance of killing you. You're gonna hate me, but genjutsu. Orochimaru has lost twice in his life, once against Itachi and once against Sasuke. In both situations, the reason he lost was the Sharingan, but more specifically, the genjutsu of the Sharingan. You see, in both situations, Orochimaru latched on to one of the Uchihas trying to take over their bodies. And it was the genjutsu of those Uchihas that allowed them to turn the tables on Orochimaru. Now, we already said we're not gonna have the Sharingan because what are the chances, but that doesn't mean we don't have access to genjutsu. And if we're being entirely real, if we catch Orochimaru in genjutsu, he's not gonna be there for long. He has incredibly precise chakra control and could snap himself out of both Itachi and Sasuke's genjutsus. That's incredibly impressive in Itachi's circumstance, considering it was Tsukiyomi. Well, actually, it wasn't like Tsukiyomi, but it's the eye that can cast Tsukiyomi, so it's adjacent. So we gotta get like super lucky, get Orochimaru in genjutsu, and then just stab and stab and stab. And then we have to get incredibly lucky a week later when he comes back to kill us. Listen, I'm not saying any of this is gonna be easy. Just like how the next entry is also not gonna be easy. We got Sasuke, the last member of Heavy/Taka. We're not talking about like adult Sasuke, we're talking about him when he was in the Akatsuki. Step number 1, don't let him bite Konan or get intimately tail inserted by Kabuto. There's another word for what Kabuto did to his chest that I would have liked to use, but monetization. Okay, cool. Have we guaranteed there's no plot armor around? Now the fight begins. Out the gate, not looking great for us because Sasuke has mostly offensive capability. Kirin, Chidori Stream, Amaterasu, Kagatsuchi. Luckily for us at this point, though, his Susano is not complete. It's actually only a ribcage, which is basically his only defensive measure. Here's the thing about Sasuke in Taka, though. There's a reason he needed Jugo and Karin around. One, because if you'll remember, he had no defensive measures, so he needed Karin around for all of the times he almost died. And 2, he needed Jugo around because he was a bit like a gaming laptop with a bad battery. There's a lot of really cool things he can do, but he doesn't have the stamina to do them. He didn't have the stamina for Susano to be around for a while. He couldn't blast Amaterasu and Kagatsuchi forever. He's like leveling strength, but not stamina. Sure, if you hit, it's gonna be deadly, but you can only try 3 or 4 times. So what you're gonna have to do with Sasuke is draw him into a long battle. Now, once again, this is gonna be tough on account of, you know, the deadly weapons he has. But Sasuke doesn't have genjutsu. I mean, like, yes, he can use genjutsu, but one of his eyes isn't designated to genjutsu like Hitachi. Essentially, his eye's abilities are shoots black flames and controls shape of black flames. So as long as you can dodge Amaterasu and you want him using Amaterasu, you should be good. Because the more that Sasuke uses abilities like Kagatsuchi, Amaterasu, and Susano, the better off you are, because eventually his eyes will start to bleed and he will get a chronic headache. Sasuke himself has said that using Susano feels like having your entire body on fire. So if you can draw him into a long fight, most likely by simply running away and bring him to somewhere and get him to activate his Susano, there's a plan. You see, there's a problem with a non-complete Susano. It cuts off at the ground. This is why eventually Susanos get legs, so you have defense from everywhere. But with a non-complete Susano, it's a bit like a cone, meaning that people in non-complete Susanos are susceptible from ground attacks. AKA, if you were to Naruto in the Chunin exams against Neji. If you can draw Sasuke somewhere and get him to activate his Susano and then pop either a earth release attack out from under him or just the shadow clone who's been waiting, you might have a victory on your hands. But regardless with Sasuke, the most important thing is not to press the offensive until you're about 10 minutes into the fight. You want those eyes bleeding before you even think about counterattacking. And even then, we might be in for a tough one. Speaking of tough ones, next on our list is Kisame. You know the Kisame that required Might Guy to open 7 gates to kill him without Samehara? The Kisame who fought Killer Bee and also required Might Guy to open to the 6th gate to kill a 30% shadow clone of him? Yeah, that Kisame. There's a way. You see, the problem that both Might Guy and Killer Bee ran into was the fact that they were trying to kill somebody with as much chakra as a tailed beast with taijutsu and ninjutsu. You don't kill a 7-foot shark referred to as the tailless tailed beast with taijutsu. I know Might Guy like kind of did it, even though Kisame just ended up, you know, unaliving himself. But like, let's be real, as an average Jonin, we're probably not even able to open to the 7th gate. In Naruto the Last, the movie, we learned that Rock Lee had actually been training Jonin around the village and made a crew called the Suicide Corps. These were people who had been trained in the 8 gates, but the chances were one of those is pretty slim. And also, we're probably not as good as Might Guy, so going up against Kisame in a fist fight, bad idea. And going up against Kisame in a ninjutsu fight, also probably a bad idea, idea because he's one of the most adept users of water release we've ever seen. But he is a shark, which leads me to believe there is one inherent weakness with him. Same thing as Swagetsu and Daedara, lightning release. And sure, you can say just because he has gills doesn't mean he's susceptible to lightning release. That's probably fair, but he uses a lot of water release. He prefers to fight in water or on battlefields covered with water. In fact, his water release is so incredibly powerful, he can cover entire battlefields with water. So using long-range lightning attacks might actually be effective on him. And I emphasize long range because let's remember, he has Samehada. Samehada has the unique ability that if it cuts you or if there's just any cuts on you, Samehada will constantly be sucking out your chakra. And let's be real, he's one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, specifically the strongest one of all time. If you get close to him, he's gonna cut you with that sword. So launching long distance attacks like Chidori Stream or Purple Lightning or something like that would be very effective. But would that be enough to kill a man referred to as the tailless-tailed beast? Probably not. We only ever saw Kisame bow his head to one person, really. We only ever saw him openly admit that one person is stronger than him. That one person was Itachi. And sure, you could say that that one person in Itachi was stronger than Kisame because of the Susano and the Amaterasu and all the other things. But what if that one person, Itachi, was stronger than Kisame because of his genjutsu? Now, like we stated before, Kisame is incredibly talented in water release, but he's also a shark and from the hidden mist, so you would hope both of those things would apply. And we know he's capable of using fire, wind, and earth release on top of the water release. So why doesn't he use lightning release? Maybe because he's weak to it? And why does he rely so heavily on his water release? Maybe because he's not quite the ninjutsu master we paint him out to be. So if his chakra control is fair to good, then we can probably catch him in genjutsu. And when we catch him in genjutsu, we can use the one thing he's weak to, lightning release. And I know I've talked about how genjutsu is going to be our best friend here quite a bit, but with Kisame it actually makes more sense because straightforward personalities are usually easier to catch in genjutsu. If you're a naturally doubtful person, you'll usually catch on to the fact you're in genjutsu rather quick. Also, I'm not calling Kisame dumb, but he's definitely not one of the smarter members of the Akatsuki. He's a soldier, not a thinker. So if we get him in a genjutsu that he finds believable enough, we can shock him to death while he's still living in some happy plane of non-existence. Because let's be real, that's the only way anybody who's not one of the strongest people in the universe, aka Might Guy, is going to kill Kisame. An unlimited tank of chakra and ridiculous strength is impossible to beat outright. You're gonna have to trick him. But since we're talking about Kisame, let's talk about the one person who he admitted was stronger than him, Itachi. Listen, this one is also not gonna be fun for us, but it actually might be better than fighting Sasuke. I know that sounds absurd considering the fact that Sasuke fought this Itachi and Itachi let Sasuke win. But there's a difference between Sasuke and Itachi, and it lies in their personality. You see, because Itachi is a pacifist and also a spy, he wanted to end fights quickly and painlessly. Because of this, Itachi actually doesn't have much in the way of offensive abilities. While Sasuke can directly aim his Amaterasu and light you on fire, Itachi can't. Itachi can blow Amaterasu in a general direction like a shotgun of black flame, but it's pretty easy to dodge. In fact, we've quite literally never seen it hit somebody. And as long as you don't make eye contact with him, which albeit is difficult, you won't get caught in Tsukiyomi. Now the problem becomes his Susano. Unlike with Sasuke, where his Susano can shoot arrows at you, Itachi's has a relatively short range. His only offensive ability with his Susano is the Sword of Totsuka, which is an insane offensive ability, I'll give you that. But it is just that, a sword, and also a sword that needs to pierce you to work. Now, should you get pierced with this sword, you will go to the realm of drunken dreams and fight's over. But in his other hand, he has a Yada mirror, which is a mirror that matches the release of any ninjutsu fired at it to nullify it, making Itachi Susano basically invincible. So how do we beat a taijutsu, genjutsu, ninjutsu genius with an invincible Susano? Unfortunately, the same way we beat Sasuke. If there's anybody who has less stamina than Taka Sasuke, it's Itachi. Unfortunately for us both, it's a lot easier to drag Itachi into a long fight than Sasuke, because once again, his offensive capabilities are not good for a long distance drawn out fight. Essentially, while conserving as much chakra as you can, because I'll remind you, all ninjutsu is useless against his Susano, you have to keep Itachi interested enough in the fight that he follows you, but not so close that he can stab you with the Sword of Totsuka. And then, just like with Sasuke, his Susano is incomplete, meaning he's susceptible to ground attacks. The problem is he's significantly smarter than Sasuke, so luring him into a trap is gonna be pretty tough. So maybe plant like 10 shadow clones just around. And the second he stands over one of them, just pop him up like a gopher. He's a pacifist, so worst case scenario, he'll give us a quick and painless death. You know who wouldn't give us a quick and painless death? Well, the man quite literally named Pain, who, while being stronger than Itachi, would be an easier fight. Why do I say that? This is Nakato we're talking about, the wielder of the Rinnegan. He's gonna whoop on us. And while you're probably right, there's a couple of ways to beat Pain that for some reason were just never really explored. See, I'm assuming that going into all of these fights, we have all the knowledge of the Akatsuki. So we know that Nagato is somewhere smashed into a bunch of rods controlling the 6 paths of pain, which means all we need to do is find Nagato. Nagato is essentially a chakra cell phone tower, meaning that any half-good sensor type ninja should be able to identify,
Oh, look, there's an insane amount of chakra coming from over there. Let's go check that out.
This would also work for Byakugan wielders. Now the problem becomes avoiding the 6 paths of pain, which is not an easy task, but you have to remember that the 6 paths of pain are all independently controlled by Nagato, and you can see through their eyes. So as long as you can like shimmy and lose them, you're fine. None of them have a sensor ability, and the Rinnegan doesn't allow you to see through walls like the Byakugan or see chakra. At the end of the day, they're just 6 pretty powerful ninjas, who Jiraiya was actually able to shake for a good amount of time in their fight in the Hidden Rain. Now, obviously, finding Nagato in all of this mess is gonna be really difficult because he can be really far away. But truly, any member of the Yamanaka clan, the Aburame clan, or the Hyuga clan would be able to find him relatively quickly. And then they can just rush to his location. And yes, obviously Nagato still has some power left, but he's immobile and also very much weakened. Then all you gotta do is give your best speech and then boom, he's dead. Or, you know, the stabbing. So you've made your way all the way up the Akatsuki ladder. Everyone's dead, except for one person. The true leader of the Akatsuki, Tobi, aka OPito. Now this isn't Ten Tails Obito, we're talking Akatsuki Obito, the guy who fought and lost to Minato. And here's the thing, we know Obito's abilities. So we know if we go to punch Obito, he's gonna phase out that side of his face and then boom, we're gonna go right through him. So we're gonna beat Obito in a similar way to how we beat Konan. Now we know Obito can phase out multiple parts of his body. So fighting Obito is largely about deception. Just like how Minato deceived him into thinking that the kunai he was throwing was his attack. Well, in reality, it was to teleport behind Obito and smash him. We're gonna do something similar. I mean, we're not gonna have flying Raijin, but we're gonna do something similar. Now, Obito can only use Kamui on parts of his body. That's why when you punch through the Kamui part, your hand goes straight through. It never made sense to me how like his clothes were still there, but you punched through the clothes. Isn't that weird? Because he's only using it on his body. Also, why can I now punch through the clothes even though they're still here when the body parts are in Kamui? So technically there's just a hole in you. Regardless, you have to feign like you're attacking Obito in a relatively easy to read way. But here's the thing, you're gonna have something in this scrunched up fist, and that thing is an explosive tag. As you're punching through Obito, you're going to release the explosive tag in that part of his body that's just a hole right now, and then close that fist up and keep punching through. Obviously, since there's nothing there, the explosive tag is gonna kind of droop down for a second, but his body is gonna pop right back because he's gonna stop using his combo. Now, there is quite literally an explosive tag in Obito's face, or stomach, or chest, or leg, and then just like with Konan, cuts. See, this would work because he can't use Kamui on things that aren't his body. He doesn't have Kakashi's eye. So if you were to drop something that wasn't his body in that hole, it's not getting warped to the Kamui dimension. It's gonna stay in that space until his body comes back, and then boom, it's either on or in his body. And as long as he doesn't notice, we're good. But if he does notice, well then, you know, we're dead, and painfully so. And that's it. That is a definitive strategy on how to kill every single Akatsuki member as a fair to middling shinobi in the Naruto world. Will this information ever be useful to you in any way whatsoever? No. But if you have better ideas and theories on how to kill these members of the Akatsuki without supernatural powers like the 8 Gates or Naruto's Jin Cloak, guys, please tell me in the comments below. And while you're down in the comments typing about how not everybody can be defeated with Genjutsu, which by the way, you're wrong, please drop a like, drop a subscribe, and hit that noti bell. Listen, I'm not saying that Karin could solo the Naruto verse, but it's a good thing that she's busy tending to that baby.